Hello Flosstube. Good morning. It is Sunday, November 7th, 2021, and my name is Sandy. My channel is Stitchin with Sandy, and I'm happy that you found me today. This is my first Flosstube, and I'm excited to share my love for cross stitch, and I hope that you'll come back and visit me again. I wanted to start out with an introduction. I noticed that from the other Flosstube videos that I've watched that I love to go back to their very first one, even though everyone's always nervous about their first video, and learn about the person I'm going to be listening to every week or every couple of weeks or every month. So I thought I'd share a little bit about myself, how I got started in cross stitch, and then I can come back and share all the things that I do, and hopefully you'll come back too. So let me tell you about myself. I am married. I have 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls. 2 of my boys are adults and they've moved out. One lives in Missouri and one lives in Arkansas. My other son is in high school, and then I have twin daughters and they're in middle school. And it's because of them that I'm actually here. Let me tell you, I've been stitching for 29 years now, and it started when I became pregnant with my first child. I love all things handmade. I've always been a crafter. I love to draw. Drawing is in my blood. It kind of runs in my family. And so anything that I can make that's creative is always special, and I feel like something like that is special to give people, and hopefully they cherish it as much as I do making it for them. So my child was coming along. I wanted to do something very special for him, but I wasn't quite sure what I would do. So I looked to my grandmother. Her name is Marcelle Robertson, and she is my inspiration in all crafty things. She's from France, and they moved here after World War II. And when she came, she has 3 children, and my mother is the youngest, and my mother was never interested in crafting. So when I was born, I ended up becoming the only granddaughter out of 5 grandkids, and so my grandmother got to share everything that she loves with me. So the first thing that she shared with me was a latch hook rug. I started doing that when I was 6 years old. She bought me a kit because we stayed at my grandmother's house all the time during vacations because my mom worked, and so my grandmother would find crafty things for me to do so that I would be busy. And so she bought me a Big Bird latch hook rug, and because I love Sesame Street, so she taught me how to latch hook rug, I think for about an hour, and then I was on my own. And so every day for 3 days I worked on that thing, and at the end of 3 days I was done. And my grandma couldn't believe that I was finished because she thought that that kit would get me through the entire winter break. But I loved it so much, I think I went through those 3 days without eating or drinking. I wanted to make sure I kept working on it, and I finished it. So she finished it off, and I made it my little welcome mat in front of my bedroom door. And it stayed there for several years until I outgrew Sesame Street, of course. But then that led me on to doing other crafty things with her. So we would paint, we would make little wooden crafts with my grandfather because he could cut the wood for us. But then when I was about 9 or 10, she taught me how to sew, not like outfits or clothing or anything like that, but she would be working on a pillowcase, or she would make clothing for us. And so if I was over and I was acting interested, she'd let me help push the fabric through and or stitch a straight stitch all the way across. And I loved it. I thought it was fun, not just because we were making something, but I loved my time with my grandmother. She was everything to me. So I did that, and then when I got to be about, I want to say 12, she would be crocheting Afghans, and that was the thing that everybody had on their couch that you could cozy up with when you were watching TV. So I decided I wanted to learn how to do that. So at the time, I grew up in the 70s. I was born in 73, so my grandmother had a big bag of balls of yarn that came from projects that she had already created. So I asked her if I could use some of her used yarn and make an Afghan just like she did. So she got out the bag with no hesitation because she said it was just sitting there collecting dust, because every time she had a new idea for a sweater or a shawl or something like that, she always bought new yarn. So she said I could have her scraps. So she taught me how to make a granny square, and I got to work. And I crocheted and I crocheted and I crocheted and made granny square after granny square after granny square. And then when I was done, there was no yarn left. I had to stop. I had no choice. So I asked my grandmother, now how do we put it together? So she helped me learn how to sew them together. And when I was done, I took it home. I put it in a cardboard box, wrapped it up in Christmas wrap with a big ribbon, saved it. I think I must have finished it in about October, because I kept it in my closet all the way up until Christmas. And my plan was that I was going to gift it to my grandmother because I made it. She would love it. But that's how it usually works, right? So I did. And when I gave it to my grandma and grandpa and they opened it, they had a smile on their face. But let me just say, with olive greens and navy blues and old golds and orange, all those ugly colors, put together with some brown too, because don't forget the brown. It was not the prettiest Afghan ever. And since my grandmother had already made a whole bunch of beautiful Afghans, mine couldn't compare to hers. But as all grandmas do, she made me believe it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever gotten. And a week after that, when I came to visit her, I found that they had this little wicker basket that their little wiener dog Tina slept in. And Tina liked to have blankets, and she would go snuggle underneath the blanket. So my grandmother would always buy like a little cheap little blanket that she could give her, or take one off her bed that she wasn't going to use anymore and give it to her. So she had put it in Tina's bed. And the story goes that when I asked how come the dog had my blanket, she said because she was sitting watching TV, cuddled up in it, and the dog would not get off, that she loved the blanket so much that my grandma didn't have the heart to not let her sleep with it, so she gave it to her. Now I know the truth is it was ugly, super ugly, but I thought it was so great that the dog thought it was so great, so I was fine with that. And that dog stayed with that blanket, I want to say at least 6 years before she died, and then they just got rid of everything. And by then the blanket was really looked bad by that point. But yeah, so I crocheted that. And then when I was pregnant with my son, I wanted to make him something special, so I went to all the stores. We only had like Value Craft, was a little tiny craft store down the street from where I lived, and then we had a Michael's, but it was in the next city over, so I hardly got to that store. But other than that, I didn't have access to cross stitch. I don't have any cross stitch stores in the area. We didn't have Flosstube back then, or YouTube for that matter. So I wasn't exposed to it, and I don't know anyone else that cross stitched. But when I was in the store at Value Craft, I saw this kit, and it said stamped cross stitch quilt, and I saw it, and it had this picture of a Noah's Ark with the cute little animals in it, and all the floss, and it had the quilt in there, and all I needed was a hoop and a needle. So I bought all that stuff. And then I had no clue what I was going to do or how to do it. I tried to follow the directions on the package, but I really didn't understand them. So I called my grandmother, because who else would I ask? And I asked her if she knew anything about cross stitch, that I found a stamp cross stitch, but I don't know how to do it. Could she help me? So I went over to her house, and my grandmother had done needlepoint and crewel, and I didn't know if she had ever done cross stitch, but apparently she did, because in France, when she was growing up, it was very important that ladies learned how to do needlework, is what she would tell me. So I showed her the kit, and she showed me how to make crosses and how to follow the pattern and know what color to use, and she helped me sort out all the floss, which we know that's a nightmare. So we sorted out all the floss on the little card that they had, and she showed me. I did 2 or 3 lines with her, and then I had to go home, and then I started working on it. And it took me 3 months, because of course it was early pregnancy, so I was having morning sickness and being tired and all of that, so I really didn't focus a lot. But I got it done in 3 months, and I went back to visit Grandma. because I wanted to show her so she'd be proud of me. And when I got to grandmother's to show her, she said, "Oh, it's nice." And then anyone knows that if someone said, "Oh, it's pause nice," that probably it's not what you thought it was. So I asked her if everything was okay, and she said, "Yes, it's lovely. Your son's gonna love it. The only thing I want to tell you is that when you stitch next time, all your X's need to cross the exact same way." And I said, "Oh, did I do it wrong?" And she's like, "No, no, no, it looks beautiful. You're fine, you're fine." And so me having OCD worried about it. And then I asked her about the back, if I closed out all my stitches correctly. And she said, "Oh, the back." I guess I made a mistake again, because on those quilted cross stitch stamp pieces, apparently you're supposed to stitch like most people stitch in hand. I don't stitch in hand, but you stitch in hand on the inside of the fabric. You don't go all the way to the back. Well, I went all the way through the back because I didn't know. So all that ugly stitching was on the back. Of course, you don't want to lay a baby on that. So my grandma said we could fix it so that no one would ever know but her and I. And now I'm sharing it with you. But she got some fabric out, with the sewing machine out, and we sewed some soft quilty, like, it wasn't quilting fabric. It was more like, it wasn't really felt, but it felt soft like felt. Maybe it was flannel. And we sewed that on the back of the quilt. And then we did the quilt ties like they used to do, where you go anytime there was a corner and you tie a piece. Well, there was no corners on my quilt, so my grandmother found like different places that it would blend in on the cross stitch so that you wouldn't know. And we tied it off like that, and it was beautiful. And when my son was born 6 months later, I wrapped him up in it. He loved it. Well, he didn't know. But by the time he was 3 years old, he was running around the house wearing it like Superman. So I know he loved it. And I have a picture to share with you of it. Please don't zoom in. The crosses are horrible. But I don't have it in real life anymore, because this last summer, my son, my firstborn, gave me my first grandson. And so he was born. So during the summer when we had the baby shower, I decided it was time to finally give it up to my son. Because, you know, I was worried he would throw it away or not love it and cherish it the way that I do. But now that he's becoming a parent of his own, I figured it was the right time to gift it to him. So I gifted it to him along with some stuff for my grandson. And he actually remembered wearing it like a superhero. And he even stopped to smell it. And he said it smelled just like when he was a baby. So I don't know what it smells like, because to me it just smelled like fabric. But to him it was special, and he loves it, and so I know he's going to cherish it forever. So I have a picture that I'd like to share with you. So then, after I finished stitching for my son's quilt, I decided I want to do some more, so I bought some bibs, and I cross-stitched some bibs, although I did them right this time, because they were quilted too, and they were stamp kit. And then there was some stamped cross-stitch quilt squares, and so you do the quilt square, and then I guess after that you're supposed to use binding and sashing and all of that and turn it into a quilt. Well, I didn't know how to do that, so I did the cross-stitch part, and then my grandmother turned them into pillows. I think I made 3, and they said love and had hearts, and then I gifted them to, I think, one to my aunt, one to my mother, and one to my grandmother in all their favorite colors. I was proud of that. But then I was at this Michael's. I had gotten to go on a trip to Michael's, and I saw counted cross stitch, and I decided, it can't be that much more difficult than stamp cross stitch. So I bought a kit that I thought would be cute. I took it home, called Grandma up, had her come over, show me, and yes, it was much different. I didn't have to worry about the backs, thank goodness. And it was on Ada. And so I liked it because it was very easy to find the hole when you're going to make your X's. And I was working on really carefully making sure all my X's went the right way. And I started doing that. So then I loved it. So from that point, this was the early 90s because my son was born in 91. So from that point, for the next 4 years or so, I was doing cross stitch. And at the time, the things that were popular at the time were Precious Moments. So I stitched Gloria and Pat Precious Moments. I've always been a teddy bear collector ever since I was 5 and had the chicken pox. And my mom bought me this big giant teddy bear. And anytime I had an itch, I was supposed to scratch on him. And after that, every time I was sick, or birthdays, or Christmas, or Easter, whatever the occasion was, somebody would buy me a bear, and I loved it. So after that, I became a bear collector. So I began stitching teddy bears by everybody I could find. And I stitched Delle Burdette. She was a designer that had lots of bear designs. I stitched every cherished teddy I could find because I started collecting the figurines, all from the first figurine that had a little bear and she was stitching strawberries. And a friend of mine had given that to me for Christmas, and I thought it was so cute. And when I found out that Gloria and Pat also did cherished teddies, I had to stitch every cherished teddy for every figurine that I owned. Of course, if I didn't own it, then I could buy it and then I could stitch another one. So I was addicted to stitching teddy bears at the time, and I had stitched a lot. I also stitched pieces by Vermilion Stitchery. They came out with the Boyd's Bears, and I had to have every Boyd's Bear. And it's funny because I bought all the Boyd's Bear patterns, but I've not stitched not even one. I don't know what happened. I just stopped stitching that. I also stitched Paula Vaughn. She was very popular at the time, and she had lots of quilts in her designs, and I never learned how to quilt, but I figured I could stitch a quilt, so why not? So I did several of her designs. My favorite one is actually hanging in my other room, and it's a quilt where it's actually a fall quilt and there's apples, so I'll have to share that with you sometime. But I loved it. So then in 1995 I was using AOL. I'm sure that makes me sound old, huh? But I used to belong to several of the cross-stitch chat rooms in AOL, and I heard that there was a need for model stitchers. So I decided, oh, I should be able to do that. Why don't I try? So Jan Lynn hired me to do some model stitching. They would send you the kit, you would stitch the kit, keep track of your time, and you would send it back, and then they would pay you. So I did that for a little bit until I learned about dimensions. And dimensions, if you stitch for them, they paid you by the stitch, but you got to choose what style you wanted to stitch. So you would tell them what your interests are. For example, I would tell them teddy bears, sunflowers, crows or ravens, those kinds of things that I loved. And they would put you in a list, and when one of those kind of patterns came up, they'd send it to you, you'd stitch it up, you'd send it back, you get paid for the stitching, and then when they were done photographing the models, however they finished them, they would send it back to you completely finished. And that was a gift because then you had it fully finished. It was framed, had a beautiful matching mat, maybe they made a tote bag or something out of it. I loved it, and that's when I got smart, because I started picking designs to add to my ideas, like butterflies. Mom loved butterflies. Hummingbirds. My aunt loved hummingbirds. So I would pick things that I knew people that I cared about liked, and then when they would send it to me, I'd stitch it up, and for the following Christmas, by the time it came back, I would have gifts already finished and completed, and they were handmade, and I would gift it to them. And so it worked for me, and it worked for them, and I got paid at the same time, which was amazing. Then I went on to stitch for Green Apple, and if you don't know who Green Apple Designs are, they put out all the patterns for Beatrix Potter and all of their flower fairies. And I think I model stitched every flower fairy that ever came out for that company. It was a lot of fun. And I think those designs were from Cecilia Barker, if I remember correctly. And then from then, I stitched for Lori Birmingham. She I was familiar with because, of course, she has bear designs. And when I found out that she needed model stitchers, I was like, I'm right here. I'm your girl. And she did. She hired me. I did some bell pulls for her. She did a lot of hardanger, and she did a lot of wedding samplers and burr samplers. But she also had a line of bears, and I stitched one. I have one to show you. She had this one, and I wanted to stitch it. I thought it was so cute. I believe it's called Very Scary. So I stitched it for her, and that's when I learned you could add buttons and you could add charms to your pieces. So she sent that. I stitched it. When I stitched for her, I stitched for pay, but I could also choose patterns that she had already done that I'd be interested in having. She'd gift that to me as well. So this was one of the ones I picked. I didn't know how to frame anything at that time, and I didn't have the money to have it sent out, so I did it myself. And I couldn't find the perfect mat for this piece, so believe it or not, I hand drew every last candy corn button, or candy corn, being inspired from the candy corn buttons, and drew them on there and colored them in with colored pencils because I figured that way it'd match. And here we are many, many years later, and it says 1998, so it's been a long time. And they're still here, and they still look cute, and I still can put it out every Halloween. So that was by Lori Birmingham. When I finished with Lori Birmingham, I started working for American School of Needlework. They had their main office about 15 miles from my house. I didn't know they were even there. And I had never heard of them before, and I never seen their patterns, but I put in interest. They had put out a job interest for stitchers, so I signed up. I went in with my pieces that I have already stitched. I shared my work with them. They thought my work was very nice and neat, but then she said, I do have one thing I need you to change. And I said, okay, because I didn't know what she was going to say. And she said, I need you to change your stitching. Change my stitching? I didn't know what she meant by that. I said, ooh, please tell me more. And she said, well, here at American School of Needlework, we're all about teaching people the correct way to cross stitch. And your cross stitch is beautiful. It looks nice and neat. Your backs are lovely, because of course backs were important back then. And so I said, well, then what's wrong with my stitching? And she said, well, here in America, the stitches on the top leg of your stitch should cross from the top left to the bottom right, and your stitches cross from the top right to the bottom left. She goes, that's European stitching. You're stitching American stitching if you're stitching for us, so you have to change that. Well, I didn't think that'd be too difficult, but of course, as we all know, if you do a pattern of things in numerous times, that pattern becomes like a lifelong thing. So I had to teach myself all over again how to stitch. So I did, and I ended up stitching for them, and I loved it because I stitched for pay. I was very fast at what I did, and when I was done stitching, I got to be published in a book, and I thought that was amazing. So every time I finished a piece and turned it in, I would be able to choose one or two books from American School of Needlework of my choosing, and then they would use the model. I wouldn't get it back, but my name was printed on all of the books of the pieces that I worked on. So that was exciting. That's when you feel like you're famous. Your name's in a published book. That's so funny. So I stitched for them, and then all of a sudden, my life changed. I got divorced. I had 2 boys to raise, so I had to go back to school because I only worked as a special ed assistant at the time, and that was not enough money to raise 2 boys by yourself. So I went back to school because I always wanted to be a teacher, and I did. That's exactly what I did. And when I finished school, I ended up meeting someone new, and I ended up getting married. So then I got hired as a teacher, my first year teaching, and found out I was pregnant at the same time right after I got married. So it all happened so fast that I kind of didn't really do any more paid stitching. I still continue to cross stitch because it's my love and that's what I love to do. But instead of doing anything with my cross stitching, I pick up a piece, stitch it, put it in a plastic bin, and store it because I couldn't afford to frame everything. There was no way I could afford that. And I didn't know you could finish anything in other ways. So didn't know what to do with it. Put it in a box. Kept stitching because I love to stitch. And I did that for several years. And it wasn't until this last, I want to say March of 2021 that I discovered Flosstube by accident. I had just finished stitching. I got a magazine that had these little patterns about this big, and there's one for every month of the year. and it comes with a little paper cardboard easel. And so you stitch it, and the idea was then you put it on the easel and you change it out every month. Well, I thought that was great because, as you can see from my home, I like to change out my house every month for whatever is happening and decorate it that way. So I decided I would do that, but instead of making them on an easel because it looked kind of cheap and I don't really want to do that, is I'd make them a pillow. But I don't know how to make a pillow that small. So I Googled in Flosstube, or not Flosstube, I'm sorry. I Googled on YouTube to find out how-to video to make a mini pillow. And when all the searches popped up, there was all these videos that said Flosstube. I didn't know what Flosstube was. Flosstube, what does that mean? Something you do with your teeth? I don't know. So I watched one, and it happened to be a Stitching with the Housewives, and it was Priscilla and Chelsea, and they had their little dog and their little Ziploc bags, and I just thought that was so funny. I couldn't stop watching them, and they became addicting. So then when I saw Priscilla's finishes, I was amazed at the way you could finish cross stitch. I'd never thought of it. In my whole life up until that point, I had made large pillows. I made my baby quilts. Every one of my kids has a quilt, and I made stockings, because every one of them has a stocking. But other than that, and the framed pieces, the rest are in the plastic bin, and there's a lot in there. So I continued to watch Chelsea and Priscilla and decided that since I like to decorate for everything all year long, I could do my stitching. So I need to pull some stuff out of that bin and finish them. So I started following some of the tutorials that Priscilla put out. I started looking through Flosstube. I put that in the Google search, and lo and behold, there's so many different people doing so many different videos. So I watched them. I thought that was pretty amazing what they could do, and people that inspired me to finish pieces were, of course, I will always say Priscilla and Chelsea first. They're the ones that I found first. And then Java Girl, Christy from Java Girl Stitches. She's not that far. I'm in Southern California. She's in Nevada. We're not that far. I'm going to hopefully get to meet her in real life one day. That's my goal. Hope she'll want to. But she finished a lot like Priscilla, and I love her designs, and I love the way she does her bows. I'm still not that great at them, but I'm trying. And then Helen D. A friend of mine likes Helen D. and suggested that I watch her because she finishes a lot too. So I watched her, and I loved watching her. I love all of her finishes. So it inspired me to then start pulling out stuff from the bin, but also inspired me to stitch more seasonal type things. So I started doing that so that I would lots of cross stitch each month on display in my home. And now when I come home, there's no other place I want to be than home. It just makes me so happy to walk through the door and see my stitching up and out in front of everybody, and I get to enjoy it every single day. So thank you to those people who inspired me. I hope that I meet many, many more. I'm still going through binge watching lots of different Flosstubers, and hoping that I'll find some new ones. I try to take their recommendations and look up those people too. So let's come to the cross stitching, because you're probably bored by now. I'm so sorry. I just thought you should know a little bit about me before I got started with my cross stitch. I have some previous finishes. I just finished putting away Halloween, but I saved my favorite piece that I finished this year, and I want to share that with you. And that is Nevermore. It came from Just Cross Stitch. I think I stitched it about, I want to say about 8 years ago. I found it in a magazine. I love Edgar Allan Poe. When I went back to school, I spent a whole semester reading about him and learning about his works, and I love The Raven. And so I saw this in the magazine and could not pass it up. So this is Nevermore, and I finished it off on this little, let me see if I can pull it out. It's a plastic fence. I guess it's for the yard. You could stab it down in the ground, but I don't want this outside. I don't want it to get ruined. But I love this fence for to the cemetery, and I wanted to find something really creative to mount it on. and we searched all over different stores, Hobby Lobby, Michael's, Joann's, couldn't find anything Halloweenish that had that in there. And then I told my husband, well, maybe I can find a fence post, a small fence post. So we scoured Lowe's and Home Depot, couldn't find anything that we really liked, and I had to go to Party City for something for school. And when we were there, my husband found this gate. He sent me a picture of it while I was at work, and it had these posts at the top that reminded me of the stitching piece, and I said, oh my gosh, you have to get it. Well, they didn't have any in stock. They just had the picture of what was supposed to be like there, and it was coming. So we went through 4 or 5 different Party Cities, and yes, we're crazy like that. We drove to the different cities to find the different Party Cities to try to find this fence, and we finally found it. So I mounted it on here with some sticky board, some pretty fabric that I found at Joann's. I had this spider that we decorated with last year for Halloween, so I grabbed that, grabbed some cobwebs from my stash, and then I don't know if you can see them, but the dollar store had these little spider lights, the little tiny ones, and when you turn them on, it's not picking up in the color, but they're actually purple. And so I thought those went perfect with the fabric and with the theme. So I put it all together, and this is my favorite thing I've ever finished. So that was my Halloween finish. Since we're in fall, I'm doing a lot of stitching for fall. So in the summertime, I looked up freebies, and this one is by Sandman Originals. I was looking up for an autumn stitching that had a crow, and this is the one I found. So I finished it on a piece of wood. This is a wooden pumpkin. I believe I got it at Michael's. It wasn't painted. I painted it. And then I added these little felt leaves on it to make it look more realistic, and then just a little bit of burlap ribbon. And I finished it off, and I love how it turned out. And then I have this crow pattern. This came from an old magazine. I think it was called Cross Stitch and Country Crafts. I think so. Or Jeremiah Junction or something like that. But it had a lot of religious things in it. I don't even know how the magazines came to me. I think I bought a subscription and then never really found anything in them that I liked or that appealed to me for my home. But this piece came out and I loved it because of the little crows. And so I stitched it up, and then when I got out my bin to start figuring out what I could finish for fall, I found it, and from here to here in the border, that little tiny border, is all I had left to do to finish the piece. I was like, what? Why didn't I finish it? So I finished it up, and then I finished it in a round. I did the fabric where I made them look roughly kind of like Priscilla does. I tried really hard to follow her tutorial, and I finished it off on a little round piece that I think they put out for Christmas at Hobby Lobby. And then my last piece that I have to show you is Thankful. This is by Priscilla herself. She had mentioned in one of the Flosstube videos when I was binge watching her that she had a freebie on her blog, so I went to her blog and I found her Thankful, and I stitched it up, and then I finished it off on a little block that I found at the dollar store. I put a piece of sticky board on the back to match the side of the block, and then just mounted it and put a bow and a little pumpkin at the top, and I love it. I'm excited to display it now that we're in the month of November. And then I just wanted to share 2 other things with you, and then we'll go into my whips. I'm almost done. As I was going on my journey of stitching, I've always stitched on Aida or even weave. As I said before, I don't like linen. I have OCD, and so those little bulbs that you get on the strings, I know there's a name for them, I can't remember what it is, but as you're making your X's, some of your X's seem wide and some seem narrow, and because I'm OCD, that really bothers me. So I know once it's on the wall, nobody's going to see it, but as I'm stitching it, I see it, and it bothered me too much. So even weave's what I love. I also love Aida because it's a no-thinker kind of activity. When you're using Aida, you just have to find the hole, and it's easy, and they always look the same, your stitches. But when I was stitching, through the years, I did Alma Lynn. I liked her bears. I was looking for a pattern called the Bear Collector. At the time, my friend had the Angel Collector and said, you can stitch that. So I did. I eventually got the Bear Collector, never stitched it, but I did get it. But this is my Angel one. I apologize for the glare, but the reason why I like this one is I had learned that they now had colored fabric that you could stitch on, and this one has, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a whole bunch of Krennic and specialty flosses. DMC had come out with their variegated floss, and so I wanted to challenge myself to try to use different flosses just to learn about them and see if I like them, and if I did, continue to use them. So I stitched that up, and then another piece that I did is when I learned about fabrics being hand dyed. Didn't know that was a thing, but a friend of mine gifted me for Christmas some fabric, and when I saw it, I thought, oh, what am I ever going to stitch this on? Well, then when my third son was big enough, I was into Joan Elliott stitching, and so I wanted to stitch him something for his room, but he wasn't a little boy anymore. He was down with Thomas the Tank, and so I had to think, what is he like? Well, he liked to read about dragons, so I know Joan did some fairy kind of designs, and so I looked it up, and she had some dragons, and so I stitched the dragon on that hand-dyed fabric. And I don't know if you could tell from the camera, but there's like browns and purples and tans and pinks all mixed in, and when I stitched this on there, I realized it was really the perfect fabric for this piece. And my son loved it, and it hung in his room for a couple years. He's now in high school, not interested, so I kind of stole it back. And so that's one of my other previous finishes. So that brings us to whips. Now I have lots of whips, but the current ones that I'm working on I would like to share with you. I don't have a lot of cross stitch for fall, and that was one of the things that was not in my bin, so I'm working on fall. So the first thing I want to show you that I'm stitching is I'm working on Prairie Schooler November. Originally I thought, oh, I'm going to do all those really fast. Yeah, it didn't happen because I love them, think they're beautiful, want to stitch them all. But they were all like a lot of the same colors, and so I have to take a break and jump around. I get bored. So I figured my goal could be stitch Prairie Schooler every other month, and then after 2 years, I'll have one for every month. So that's my goal now. But I did November, it's my first one. This is where I'm at. I bought one of those fabrics from Michaels. One of the Ada fabrics that came out recently are like variegated colors. I don't know. So I don't know if you can see it, but it's got like oranges and pinks and tans in it. I thought that was pretty, and I thought that'd be perfect for this fall piece. So here I am. I just need a little bit of more trees, and then the grass at the bottom, and then the little border of fall leaves, and it'll be done. So hopefully by the next time you see me or my videos, it'll be finished. And then my next, sorry, I'm trying to find a place to put everything. I don't know how you experts do it, but I'm learning. The next piece that I'm working on, my next whip, is my favorite thing in the whole world is sunflowers. It's favorite flower ever. And I was watching Flosstube for Fat Quarter Shop, and they had a mystery sale coming up, and the first part of the sale gave you a little sneak peek, and it was a sunflower. Well, that sold me. I had to do it. So this is the piece, and it's called Autumn Beauties. And when I was watching Priscilla and Chelsea, of course, I loved their idea of coffee tea dyeing. Watched their tutorial, coffee tea dyed some Modico 28 count, and here is my work in progress. So I did the crow first and the sunflower because those are my two favorite things. Then I'm working on here. All I have left are a few sunflowers and the little sign, and of course the rest of the border, and I'll be done with that one. And then my next work in progress is on one of Helen D's videos. She stitched up the cutest little autumn piece, and it was called, by the Trilogy, is that how you say it? Autumn Sneak Peek. And so I'm doing that. I did pick some oatmeal Ada. It was what was in my box to stitch, and this is my start on it. The only thing I'm not changing the colors. The only thing I am changing is each frame in the pattern, let's see if I can show you again, is the same color, but after stitching the first square with all the fall colors, and I like that, I decided to make each frame will be a different fall color. So give it a little bit more color than browns. And then the other thing is the order. In this order, it has the leaf girl, then the scarecrow, then the turkey, then the apples, and then the pumpkins with the crow. I've decided to do it in order of the season and what happens first, or at least how we celebrate it. And so I did the falling leaves start, then we always go apple picking, so I put that second. Next I'm going to stitch the scarecrow, then I'll do the pumpkin because of Halloween, and then the last one will be the turkey because that's what's happening this month. So that's the only changes I'm making. I know they're not major, but I'm working. I just learned that you can make changes, so give me time and we'll see what I come up with. Then the next work in progress is I belong to the Calendar Crates Club through Fat Quarter Shop. So I'm working on November. Usually I have this month already done, so it's here out displayed the whole month. But I got behind with Halloween stitching. I did a whole bunch. And so here's what I have so far. And I have to say that this is my favorite one so far. And I think the reason why I love it so much is I love this border. I think that Priscilla did such a fabulous job on that design, and I love it. It's my favorite. So almost done with that one. And then my next work in progress is another Priscilla piece because I just love all of her chalkboard designs. And so this one is Gobble Gobble because you can't have Thanksgiving without a turkey. And I don't have a lot done because I ran out of Weeks Dye Works pumpkin, so I only got that far. I just got the pumpkin floss in the mail. Mail's kind of slow lately. And I just finished the pumpkin, so I should have this one done in a day or so. And then the last work in progress for right now that I've been working on is for World Cross Stitch Day, usually I just pick something and I start it. And this year, when Kimberly was talking about what are you going to stitch for World Cross Stitch Day, we have this piece and they showed it, and this is the piece called Stitchography. And what sold me on this piece was the wooden spool. I thought that was so cute for bobbins, and I was like, wow, I could do that. I'll do that. I don't have a craft room. With all the kits that I have, there's no extra room for me, so I thought I'll stitch that. Well, I've started it. Let me show you where I've gotten. This is where I've gotten. Almost done. Only have this little bit left. But now that I've stitched it, I think I want to make it into a project bag. I have no clue how to make a project bag. I tried following one video and my bags didn't come out very cute, but no one's going to see them except me, so I can use them. But I want to get better at them, and when I do, I want to make this one a project bag. And then that's all my work in progress right now. My goal is to hopefully have those finished by the next time I see you. I'm planning to try to do a video every 2 weeks. I think that's something I can commit to. And so hopefully by the 21st I'll have lots of finishes to show you. I do have one finish that's not fully finished. A friend of mine gifted me, she had some scrap fabric. She didn't know what to do with. She felt like the scrap fabric was too small to do anything. She does a lot of big stitching, but she knows that I do a lot of Christmas ornaments, so she gifted it to me. So I saw this week that Liz Matthews came out with her, what's it called? Winter Celebration Small. So I said, wonder what that is. And this is it. It's so cute. You can find it on her website. And I decided I'm going to stitch that up on the piece that my friend gifted me. And it came out so cute. I didn't do the border. I know that Liz Matthews has a little border there. I didn't really care for it, no offense to anyone. But I did like the center part. So I'll probably make that into a pillow ornament. And then I'll have another ornament for Christmas. Then lastly on my list of what should I cover in a floss tube, I know it's very long. It's my first one. I promise my others won't be this long. Is my haul. So I purchased the 5th Day of Christmas sampler entry from Liz Matthews. I do love this one. and it's hard to choose which to do because I love the tree, and I bought it for the tree because I thought I'll stitch 3 or 5, has to be odd numbers, trees, and make a center display for my dining room table. But then when I got the pattern and I saw how the sampler is a little bit different than the tree, and it has this pretty border at the top, and I think I have to do all of it. So I don't know when I'll get all of it done, but I'm gonna try. And then my other piece that I bought, Little House Needleworks, came out with Jingle All the Way. And I bought it because I love the red barn in there. It's so pretty. And I love the quilts. Because just like when I stitched Paula Vaughn, I stitched them for the quilts. And I like this one too because there's quilts on it. And then lastly, I purchased this pattern. I was looking for a Baby's First Christmas ornament for my new grandson, and I looked on Facebook and I asked anyone if they had any ideas of a pattern that was out there, and somebody recommended this one by Lizzie Kate, and it's First Christmas, so I'm going to stitch him his ornament so that he'll have an ornament this year. And my goal is that every year that I am going to stitch him a new ornament each year, so when he grows up he has a collection of ornaments that I made for him, and there'll be something hopefully that he'll treasure forever. Well, I want to thank you so much for sticking around. Sorry it's so long. My plans are to continue to finish my autumn whips by the next video, and then if I get a new start, because I've been using Tiny Decisions wheel spinner, and I spin the wheel every morning Monday through Friday for it to choose what I work on so I don't get tired of one. I like having different options each day so that I never get bored of my pieces, because I want to finish them. That's my goal. And if I get it, I put new start in there because we should all be rewarded with new starts here and there. So if I get a new start this week, my plan is to do the mini piece that goes to the calendar crates, because I haven't done that one yet. I'm only working on the big one. And then on weekends it's free choice, and I get to choose whatever I want to stitch. So I just grab one of the ones that I've loved and keep working on it until it's finished. So the next time you see me, I'm hoping to have all of those that I shared with you fully finished, ready to go. And my next video will probably be on November 21st. My daughters are helping me figure out how to put this out there in the internet world. I don't know how to do all this, but I'm willing to learn. So until then, I'd like to close with saying, be confident, be courageous, be creative, but please be kind in everything you do. And have a happy stitching day. Bye.